Some of us know St. Josephine Bakhita. Born in 1869 in Sudan to a loving family with 6 siblings, she was abducted by slave raiders at the age of 7. She was so traumatized that she forgot her name. The name Bakhita was given by her captors, and it meant lucky. In the next 6 years, she was sold numerous times, often standing naked before various purchasers. And the last 3 years were under the ownership of a Turkish general whose wife beat Bakhita daily. Perhaps most horrific was that they cut her to give her tattoos, leading to a total of 114 scars. When she was 13, her life improved when an Italian diplomat bought her and assigned her to help the housekeeper, and they did not beat her. Though treated much better, she was still looked upon as an object, and she was given to an Italian woman back in Italy, where she served as a nanny. When this woman and her husband left on a year-long trip, they left Bakhita in Italy to live with some Canossian sisters. It was during this time that she began her encounter with Jesus. There was a devout Catholic man who gave her a crucifix, and when he did, he kissed it. And he said to her that it was Jesus, the Son of God, who was on the cross and who died for us. And Bakhita later wrote, "I didn't know what it was, but impelled by a mysterious force, I hid the crucifix in case my mistress took it off me. Before then, I had never hidden anything because I was never attached to anything. I remember how I used to look at it in secret and feel inside myself something I couldn't explain. It was while living with the sisters that she agreed to learn about the Christian faith. She wrote, 'Those holy mothers instructed me with heroic patience and brought me into a relationship with that God whom, ever since I was a child, I had felt in my heart without knowing who he was.' Within a year, she asked for baptism, and when her owner decided to take her back to Sudan, Bakhita refused, and she was supported by Italian law, which officially did not permit slavery. At 21, she was baptized and given the name Josephine. She later joined the Canossian sisters. She was loved by the children she taught and by all the townspeople where she lived. And she trained sisters to go to Africa. Interestingly, before her baptism, there was this little Italian girl who noticed that Bakhita was always smiling, but there was something odd about the smile. It was a kind smile, but not a happy one. But after Bakhita's baptism, that same little girl realized that Bakhita was radiant with joy, the sadness was gone, and she was completely transfigured. According to her official Vatican biography, St. Josephine was often seen kissing a baptismal font, the font where she was baptized, and she would say, "Here I became a daughter of God." When we look at her face, we see someone who is full of peace and full of joy, a joy that the world cannot give. And that picture is perfect because St. Josephine would often pray before the crucifix, and she saw there the person who suffered for her, who suffered like her, and who loved her. Jesus wants all of us to have a similar transfiguration because sometimes when we smile, it's not a happy one. Do you know anyone in your life who smiles but is not too happy? Today we're celebrating Jesus' transfiguration, and the gospel begins. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. Now, 6 days later is a very specific time reference in the gospel. So why is that so important? Because one reason is that something so important happened 6 days before, and the disciples remember 6 days later something changed. What had happened was, the last thing that Jesus taught 6 days before this is that he's going to suffer and die, and he's going to be raised. And when they heard that he's going to die, the disciples, they were shocked. What? Like, this is not supposed to happen this way. So they're confused for 6 days. But 6 days later, something finally gives them peace, and it's this. He was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Now, we've pointed out before that in the Old Testament, whenever Moses went to pray to God, it was said that his face shone afterwards because God was giving that glory upon him. But in Jesus' case, there's a difference. The light doesn't come from outside. The light comes from inside. Why? Because Jesus is God. And so Jesus, in the same way, he wants that light to come from within us. Now, how does that happen? It happens when we receive Jesus more into our life. We start loving him in return. We start following his plan. We follow his teachings. Now, there's a number of us here, we felt that. Jesus loves us so much. And you start experiencing that, and you start becoming transfigured. I was recently thinking about 2 teenagers here in our church, 1 girl, 1 boy, and they're changing. Now, there's this one girl, as long as I've known her, she has never seemed that happy. Now, that's just my observation. But recently, man, she's beaming. It's great. And I know she's coming closer to Jesus, and she's getting it. And then there's this young boy. He's serving other people because he's serving like Jesus in very concrete ways. And I see him. He's got energy now. This is great. He's coming alive because he's following God's plan for him. The gospel continues. Suddenly, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking to him. So Moses represents in the Old Testament the law that God gave, and then Elijah represents the prophets. So in the Old Testament, those are kind of considered the 2 big parts of the Old Testament. So what God is saying is, when Moses and Elijah appear with Jesus, they're trying to get the disciples to trust him. If the Old Testament trusts Jesus, you guys should too. And finally it says, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my son, the beloved, with him I am well pleased. Listen to him." Okay, so there's that theme again. Jesus is saying, if you want to receive the resurrection, you're going to have to go through the cross. There's going to be suffering to get to life. But trust me. And now God the Father is saying, the voice is God the Father. You have to listen to Jesus. So this leads to a problem in our human lives. All of us want to be more happy, but we don't want to go through the pain to get there. So everyone wants to be in better shape and more healthy physically. Very few people are willing to spend money to get there. That's not good. Everyone wants to be closer to God. Everyone always says, yeah, I want to be closer to God. I want to be closer to God. Very few people are willing to change their schedules to put in more prayer and then let something else go out. So the key is you have to focus on God's plan. God has this great plan for us. He wants us to be so happy. All of us want to make little changes in our life. Everyone likes to make little tweaks. Oh, I'll change this little thing here and there. God doesn't want that. He wants big changes. Why? Because he wants to give us a lot of happiness. So just keep on thinking about God's plan for you, but you have to cooperate. So if you look at St. Josephine Bakhita's life, there are at least 5 times in the story I just told you where she cooperates with God. She makes some big changes. So first, when that man gives her the crucifix, she treasures it. She doesn't just put it away. She's grateful for it. Then she asks the sisters to teach her about God. Then she asks for baptism. When her owner wants to take her back to Sudan, she says, "No, I'm not going." She puts her foot down. Let's go. And then finally, she asks to become a sister. Here at St. Anthony's, we call July and August our Sabbath summer, time to renew ourselves, to really rest and fill up our tanks. So we're halfway through the summer, and there's still time to achieve God's plan for us. So just 3 things to keep in mind. 1, keep on filling yourself up. Keep on filling yourself up with Jesus and his love. 2, next Sunday, after the 10 a.m. Mass, we're going to have this big outdoor event in the school parking lot. So lots of free food. You're all invited. You all have to go. Okay, and I really would hope that our family can get together. I hope you can meet someone new, at least just one person. Now, here's the thing. There are times in our life we don't want to be with people, and we definitely don't want to meet anyone new. But if you kind of get through that cross, that might be the thing that brings you out of yourself, that gives you joy. Now, if you won't do it for yourself, just think next week, you could be that person who gives life to another person. So that man who gave St. Josephine the crucifix, just such a small gesture, you could do that next week. You could be that one person that could give life to other people. So just think about that. And finally, number 3, when September comes, we're going to be starting Alpha first week. Think about inviting someone to it. After the Transfiguration, the disciples come down the mountain, and now they have a choice, 2 choices. They can avoid the cross, or they can go to it and then receive the resurrection.